Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to the latest edition of the Icons of Sporting Entertainment, where we look at iconic characters, personas who have left their mark on the sports entertainment industry over the last few decades. And I'm delighted to be joined by this evening. If you're a big fan of the WWF and the WWE throughout the 90s, especially the late 90s, early 2000s, you would have seen this flamboyant character on your TV screens every night on Monday Night Raw or Friday Night SmackDown, where his sort of group, his posse of girls and the whole train, the one and only, the Godfather. Godfather, absolute pleasure to talk to you. For all the Irish wrestling fans that are tuned in today, that have followed you throughout the years in terms of what has been a marvelous career. Can you tell me, was it always the dream growing up as a teenage boy to get involved in wrestling? And were you a fan of wrestling actually growing up? Did you watch the wrestling in the 70s and stuff like that? And were you a fan yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. You know, I love all the Irish people. You guys are drinkers. I mean, last time I was there, I thought I could drink, but the Irishmen put me down under the table. They showed me what is what. But I was not a wrestling fan growing up.
Okay.
I was a roller derby fan.
A roller derby fan.
Now, see, in the Bay Area, back in the, I might not look it or act it, but I'm a little older. Okay. And back in the 70s, in the Bay Area, roller derby was much bigger than wrestling. And that's what we used to go to and have a few beers and have fun. I got into wrestling just by a movie, to be honest, a movie.
Okay. And you mentioned that sort of movie in terms of that getting involved in wrestling. And was that sort of that experience that made you say, listen, I'm going to try out and go and see what this Larry Sharpe and the Monster Factory is all about?
They were filming a movie called Over the Top with Sylvester Stallone. It was an arm wrestling movie. Okay. And it was filmed right down the street from a titty bar that I worked, a topless bar I worked at. Okay. Well, a lot of those guys in that movie were extras and wrestlers. Scott Norton was in that movie. And they would come in and they're like, in that time, dude, I'm just massive. I'm powerlifting. I'm a biker. I'm all tattooed. And they're like, you should get into wrestling. And I'm like, nah. I actually said, I don't want to do that phony ass wrestling.
Yeah.
And so then they said, well, I mean, I was a biker at the time. So they're like, have you ever heard of Bam Bam Bigelow? And I'm like, yeah, the dude with the tattoos, I've heard of him. They said, well, he made $1 million last year. And I went, how much? So, I mean, I made a call to Larry Sharpe and it took off quick. I mean, it went from me making a call to me moving to Paulsboro, New Jersey, to within 6 months from that call to Larry Sharpe, I'm wrestling Jerry the King Lawler in Memphis, Tennessee on a Monday night. And I go over in the middle, 1, 2, 3, my very first match. 6 months since I made that call.
Wow. And the Godfather, in terms of your early sort of history with the WWF, you obviously had a great sort of friendship with The Undertaker, and it was he in terms of told you, and obviously in terms of the WWF, but in terms of one of those first roles, some of those early sort of roles like Sir Charles, in terms of Charles Barkley, the basketball player and stuff like that. I suppose it takes everyone a bit of time to find their true calling in terms of their own character. So those early years in terms of learning that craft, was there a few ups and downs along the way?
There was more ups and downs. I really didn't work as Sir Charles. When I was coming back from working with Otto Vaughn's Catch Wrestling in Germany. And I was there for about 8 months. And when I got back, I got a tryout with the WWF at the time. And they didn't know what to call me. And it was in Phoenix. So they called me Sir Charles just because they wanted to get heat on me. And that's the only time I ever wrestled as Sir Charles. Once I wrestled, Vince hired me. They put me on payroll. And he told me, go home. He goes, keep training. Stay in shape. He goes, we gotta come up with something with your face. He says, you have a body of a monster, but you have a baby face. He goes, we got to do something with your face. And so that's how they came up with the Papa Shango thing.
And was it anything to do with the James Bond movie Live and Let Die?
Oh, yes. When he called me, he said, I want you to go rent the movie Live and Let Die. He goes, and I already knew the movie. He goes, there's a voodoo character in there that we're going to take off from. And I already knew the character because I liked the movie. Yeah. And that's where I got the laugh. That was from the Uncola guy. That's who that guy was. 7-Up Uncola. He had that laugh. The lime in the coconut.
And obviously then, I suppose, The Godfather, you were in so many prominent matches in the next few years in involvement in WWF. Were you sort of startled by how quick you sort of shone in terms of ascended up the ladder, in terms of so quickly, in terms of early on in being involved in the WWF?
No, not really. I was just so different, man. There was very few black people. There was no black people that looked like me with tattoos. And so, no, I mean, I've always excelled at athletics. So I expected it. I've always been pretty successful in athletics or anything that was sports related.
And was there any truth during your first stint, when your first stint came to finish in WWF, that you were close to joining WCW, but at the last moment you started to decide you were going to stay on good terms with the WWF? Was there any sort of truth in that?
They were talking with me about joining the NWO, and my contract was coming up. And
that was with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash.
Huh?
That was with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I was in negotiation with them, and then we came up with a deal, and then I didn't hear from them for like a week, and I called them, no call back. Then all of a sudden I looked to watch the show, and I see Virgil on there. So they decided to save a lot of money and go with Virgil instead of me, which was the best thing that ever happened to me because I continued to be the Godfather.
Yeah, and you mentioned that continuing to be the Godfather, and the Godfather certainly took off later on in the sort of 90s, that character as such. And can you tell me, in terms of the story, how that sort of came about? Was it your own ideas in terms of mixed with the sort of creative sort of team, or how did you go from Kama Supreme Fighting Machine to the next sort of what we know you as today, the Godfather?
Well, they put me in Kama. They put me in the Nation of Domination. And basically that was coming to an end. The Rock became The Rock. D'Lo and Mark Henry were a tag team. I was kind of left out. So me and my wife came up with the Godfather, the WWEF. I don't know what it was at the time, but they had nothing to do with it. It was all me and my wife. I kind of had carte blanche to kind of do what I wanted to. And they were, I was never scripted. I could say anything I wanted to say. They didn't ask me what I was going to say. And I was out there saying I was having fun, but I was never scripted. And it was all me and my wife's idea, mostly my wife.
And I suppose for all that sort of entertainment as the Godfather, in terms of the Good Father, then I suppose in terms of right to censor, was that a sort of a gimmick that probably took away from the Godfather in terms of his persona, sort of such? Was it probably, dare I say it, was there something, a bad sort of gimmick?
The Good Father was the end of the Godfather. At that point, they were becoming more PG. They became public. Vince was answering to people. They were getting away with they were doing away with all that Attitude Era, the puppies, the Suck It, the Godfathers, the Val Venuses, and they were cleaning it up. And so you kind of got caught in that. And so they tried to do something where they kept the character alive with the Good Father, which I hated. And then they tried to bring me back, but I wasn't a pimp. I was an escort. I owned an escort service, and the girls were escorts. They weren't hoes. And I couldn't talk about rolling fatties or smoking weed. So that was the end of it.
That was the end.
We kind of finished up right then.
And I suppose The Godfather, being involved in the independent circuit as well. Have you found that enjoyable, traveling all over the world, wrestling in sort of different countries? And has it been a sort of an experience? I know the rigors being heavily involved in a WWF and WE in terms of the travel, but being on the independent circuit, being able to pick certain promotions, certain events in different countries.
I'm not really on the independent. I don't wrestle.
Okay.
I don't do any wrestling whatsoever. I'm not really on the independent circuit. I do more signings.
Okay.
I'm really involved in the cannabis business. I do a lot of cannabis related things. No wrestling. So I'm not really going to too many wrestling shows. I go to autograph signings and stuff, but I'm not really part of the independent wrestling scene.
And The Godfather, in terms of your whole experience involved in the WWF and in terms of Mark, would you do it all over again in a heartbeat?
You damn right I would. I would do my whole life over again. Man, if I wrote a book, people wouldn't believe it in my life. I've been blessed, man. I'm 60 years old now. I'm still having fun. I'm still smoking and hanging around hoes and living. I believe me, man. I ain't no different now than I was on TV.
In terms of that industry as well, I suppose you've made some very good friends throughout the years, but in terms of those characters and personas, in terms of enemies, is it sort of true that sometimes some feuds that wrestlers have maybe stay on in terms of real life as well?
I don't know about all that. I don't know about all that. One of my best friends, that most people know in the business is The Undertaker.
Yeah.
Bradshaw, Ron Simmons, Teddy Long, RVD. Those are some guys that I talk to all the time, and we communicate a lot.
Yeah, and The Godfather, lastly, before I let you go, you mentioned you were in Ireland and you mentioned about the Irish being drinkers. What was your favorite sort of store? Have you any memory of your time in Ireland before we let you go, given that you're on?
Well, they drink. They asked me. They said, "Well, we know that you and Taker drink Jack Daniels, so we drink Jack the whole night." And I'm gonna tell you something. I don't brag about my drinking. I'm much more of a cannabis smoker than I am a drinker, but I can drink. Man, them boys way outdrank me. They had to take me back to the hotel, and then I had to wrestle. I had to actually wrestle. I was in a battle royal where I was Papa Shango and Godfather, and it was difficult. But yeah, I leave the Irish alone when it comes to drinking.
On that note, The Godfather, an absolute pleasure talking to you today on the airwaves to relive your memories of an iconic career throughout the entertainment industry that has spanned over multiple decades as such, and always a flamboyant character, what we saw on the TV screens, and a flamboyant character in real life. We wish you and all your loved ones a very successful 2021. Stay safe. God bless. And The Godfather, definitely one of the icons of the sports entertainment industry.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody. But I want everybody to make sure you follow me on Instagram. I'm The Godfather with the blue check mark. And on the Facebook, I'm the WWE Godfather. But I'm really involved on Instagram. So give me a follow.
Will do. Take care, Godfather.
Peace, everybody.